Can a gun be so good that it can give you an advantage? In this video, I review the Staccato XC. If you've been following my channel, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of the double stack 1911. Now, what's cool about this video is I can actually say 2011 because this, in fact, is a true 2011. If you are not familiar with that term is trademarked by Staccato, so using it in another application would be considered an infringement of their trademark. Now, I want to give a shout out to David at the Humble Marksman channel, as he was the one that gave us this gun for the review, and so this is his actual gun. Alright, so we're going to kind of get the elephant in the room out of the way, which is the price. Currently, Staccato has this listed on their website for $4,299. Now, there are going to be a lot of questions with that. So, is it worth it? Does the performance match the dollar? I'll answer that throughout this video. So, just kind of starting with some of the more specifics. This is for 9mm, and they only come in that fashion, and this is going to be a comped setup here, as you see up through here. It's very serious in nature as you kind of make your way around it, that it is just nothing but business. And as you kind of start to dive into it, you just see that everything is intentional to it. You know, these serrations are incredibly effective, and they also double as a faction of both being a lightning cut and also a little extra ventilation for a little bit of heat that may dissipate. And as you move your way around, you really wouldn't use these serrations specifically unless you were probably running this iron sight. Now, in this case, David decided to use a Delta Point Bro, and yes, that's what I call them, a Delta Point Bro. And what's neat is that even with that setup, you can in fact co-witness through this. And what's nice is that it has a green fiber optic, and what's great about that is when you have a red dot, and let's say that it goes out for whatever reason, you have a distinguishing green fiber optic here that also works great at night that you can pick up should this optic in any way go down. Now, when you get into a lot of these comp guns, a lot of the area you see typically sacrificed is in the front sight. Typically they're blacked out or they're just very meager. And a reason for that is because how they're often placed is that they're either riding on the slide or so close to the comp that it can actually get so dirty that it's pretty much unusable. Where Staccato went well with this is in how they decided to angle the gas out of this. So when this thing is actually in use, rather than going directly up, which can disperse out this way, it actually is tilted this way to give the effect of not only pushing the comp down, but pushing it more towards you as it goes through its cycling method. So that gas inadvertently just makes its way away from the front sight. And I like this gun too because although there's a heavy price tag, there's more to this story. It still is a no frills experience. And things as you move around to it too is that the ergonomics here are things that they have really developed over the years. You know, I was kind of being picky about these safeties because I tend to like these shielded safeties more so because I like to ride the safety hard. But as I shot this gun, I actually had no issues with it. I found that the sizes were just right for me. And what's neat about this too is if you're to carry it or anything like that, it wouldn't get hung up in most holsters. And as you kind of play around with it, very audible, very tactile, just set. Now this was great because when I did my first shots with this gun, it was actually at an IDPA match. And so the first portion of that was actually shooting strong hand and weak hand. And this side was a huge benefit to having this. So if you have ambi safeties, that is an awesome benefit. Now I want to point out here that the challenge with this is if you are a lefty as it's set up currently, you could not flip this mag release. So while you have these ambi safeties, you don't have an ambi mag release. Now, if you'd watched the video I made on my actual Staccato, this was my gripe was the mag release, is that it was a tad stiff. And even with this one, yeah, it's still a little grit. You can hear it though. Just dragging a little bit. Now, you have options for that. You could in fact either sand it down on the inside or do a little bit more work. And in my case with my P, I just used it so much till it actually broke in. So I wouldn't say it's a hindrance, but for the price point that you are grabbing into, you wouldn't think that would be as gritty as it is. So let's talk about the balance, because that will play into the shooting experience. Now, if you see that you have a full-length dust cover, in addition to that, you have this comp that acts as a sight block. Now, interestingly enough, this is what we call an island barrel. So you'll see that as I pull this back, that you in fact have an extension from the comp that actually holds a front sight. And so the reason for that is because this actually ends up providing not only a better lockup, but also takes more reciprocating mass off the slide. When I talk about balance of this, a lot of the weight is in the front. So there are kind of an older way of thinking about that from both a competition and even maybe a practical standpoint, is that, you know, in theory, the more weight you have out here, it should in fact help with a little bit of mitigating the muzzle rise up at the front. So the challenge with that is when you're shooting multiple targets, your transitions are going to take just a touch more time. And that's something I had to learn as I was starting to shoot both stages and I did my transition drills with this gun. Now let's talk about the grip. Grip is in every way practical and useful as well. You've got a lot of intentionality as you move your way around here. All the texture itself is in a great place. I've always kind of loved this type of texture from Staccato, especially in this generation of grips. It feels more to me like a 200 grit sandpaper, you know, something that's just a little rough, but it wouldn't necessarily, you know, hurt your stomach if you decided to carry this against your little belly there. If you notice here, as you get closer, there's nothing really here. Well, why is that important? Because here's the thing. If your shooting hand, so I'm right-handed, if your shooting hand is so engaged, you're gonna start to inhibit some of the dexterity in your fingers. So when you see guys shooting 2011s and you see that they sometimes have trigger freeze, a lot of that is usually attributed to too much tension in the shooting hand. Or a good way to test that is the Ben Stoker way of saying the middle finger. Now, I'm not gonna do anything derogatory here, YouTube, so you're okay. But you should be able to lightly pull your finger out. And as I'm doing this, one thing you'll notice is that this finger seems to want to kind of come up with it. So what that suggests is if this is overly engaged, this one also is going to kind of grab some of that tension. So the idea is that you place a lot of your pressure here, which you'll see is on the front side of here. You'll get a lot of your pressure from these two fingers, get yourself up into the grip tank and ride the safety. That is the ideal way to hold the 2011. So as we move our way around it, you'll see that it's all throughout the back strap. And the one thing I like about the XC and even the Staccatos in general is that when you engage the grip safety, you'll notice that there is just a little bit of a tab. That's big. If you've been watching, you'll see how I hold my dominant hand. Well, I naturally have just a little bit of a gap there. And so I can obviously work to engage that. And if you watch the video when I did this on the Terran Tactical, this was kind of a point of contention for me, is that sometimes I would miss engaging the grip safety. That's why they have that little hump there, because it's intentional to help assist in pushing that grip safety in. As we're just kind of moving back to the barrel, this is neat because this is all one integrated piece here. And you'll see that here with the machining as it's gone all around throughout this island. It is bull barrel in design, and the characteristics of shooting a gun with the bull barrel setup is phenomenal. What that ends up translating to is less felt recoil in the hands and just a little bit less muzzle rise. So it's getting really the best of both worlds and putting a lot of weight up front with this full dust cover length. The island block / comp, all the weight is where it should be, at least from the shooting experience. And one thing I've always liked about Staccatos is that even though they carry a price, they're probably the easiest guns in this platform to live with for the quality you get, because that fit is actually very tight, especially up here against the island barrel itself, is that it's locked up well. And even back here, there's not even really anything going on. It's all firm, and it almost attributes to things that you would find in a gunsmith hand fit gun. But the thing is with this is that they've gotten these tolerances down so well that, you know, in terms of maintenance, I can speak personally that if you saw my video on my P, I literally slapped on grease when I first bought it, and I didn't even think about it. And it was an accidental oversight on my part, but I just shot the gun as my daily carry, took it to 2,500 rounds, didn't clean it, and it kept working. And I was really surprised about that, because the misnomer on this platform is they need to be cleaned often, a lot. they need to be oiled to the extent that they're throwing it in your eyes. Well, with the XC, I can say without a doubt that is not the case. This is actually meant to be a gun that you can live with and use and shoot a lot. And one thing I loved about this is their toolless guy rod. And I have a kind of a clip here of me playing with that with the Staccato P. But essentially, rather than putting either a pin or having a bushing style barrel like you've seen some of the older 1911s, this toolless guy rod really lets you go do work out in the field if you have to do a quick field clean or anything like that. So you're not fishing for either a paper clip or something silly to take apart this gun. All right, so we cannot talk about a 2011 without talking about the trigger, because that is the epitome of this. Now, this is an unloaded gun and it's safely put in my office here. So right here, you'll see that it's set at 0, and we'll give it a quick pull here to engage that safety. And you'll see here, this is about 2.9 ounces. You'll find that there's just a touch of pre-travel. Actually a fair amount, which is nice, especially if this is your daily gun and considering the actual weight of this. So you get to a nice firm wall. And that brake probably feels a little heavier than what it's advertised, but you pull it back and yep, it's a brake. Sometimes you can feel a little deflection or a little bit of hiccup as you pull it back, but there was none of that. So the reset is nice. It's interesting because as I'm pulling it out, it feels light at first and then you really feel a forcible reset. Now that's kind of interesting because a lot of times when you get guns with lighter pulls, especially, you know, sub 3 pounds, usually your reset can be compromised because it'll feel a little bit anemic as that sear spring is trying to push it back on you. They did a good job with this. And why is a reset important? Well, when you do these follow-ups, it allows you to get right back on that wall quicker. So I've seen guys out there as a result do 11s or 12 splits with this gun in this stock configuration. All right, just briefly talking about the Magwell here. The Magwell is incredibly practical, both from a size standpoint. So if you decided to carry this thing, you wouldn't have this big giant flower pot hanging out the side, but useful in every way in the sense that it's all kind of beveled in here to sort of match the Magwell. And I say sort of because there is a little bit of a ledge here. Now, let's not let that be a fit and finish thing, because a big key thing with this platform specifically, whether it's 1911 single stack or this, is that when you put a mag in there, what you don't want to have happen is over insertion. And as I look at the factory mags that come with it, it sits in there just nice. So you can actually slam these mags in here and not have to think about it becoming a victim of either damaging your ejector or even the mag release itself. Now, one thing we want to talk about too is, because we've had such crazy rule changes with IDPA, let's just see where this thing fits. Okay, so initially it's good. Now, in the past, if you've seen either the Sand Viper or my DS9 video, you have to use these angled base pads typically to be compliant. Now, with the Staccato 17 round mags, that more than fits the bill. So right out of the box, you're gonna go out and be able to do good things with this. So it is IDPA legal. If you wanted to shoot USPSA, it would fall under open minor. I actually see a lot of these shot with guys that are in the tactical games. So a ton of guys love to shoot this gun, and it's actually gaining a ton of popularity in IDPA. So let's talk about the weight of it. Now on my channel, when I talk about weight, I talk about its competition weight. And what I mean by that is we include everything that comes with the gun. So in this case, we have an optic on here, the Delta Point Bro, along with a factory magazine that we would end up weighing it. And it comes in right at 40.5 ounces. So if you took the mag out, just to give you an illustration here, that's 37 ounces. Now, interestingly enough, I believe on Staccato's website, it says it comes in at 38 ounces. You'll find that it's actually a little bit lighter if you consider the weight of an optic, which is about 1.5 ounces. So it's a little bit lighter than what they advertise at the factory. Oh, if you were looking to run this on IDPA, it's been really popular in carry optics. And if you just simply pull off this sight, and you could run this in ESP, which if you're not familiar with that, that's just the iron sight class. So it definitely is a competitive gun. As far as holster fitment, this particular gun will fit in any 5-inch holster, especially if it's made for a full-length dust cover, such as my Red Hill Tactical here. And as you see, it goes right in and has the tension. And I have not had to adjust this, and I use this typically with my MPA. And another holster I like to use too, and made with similar dimensions, especially if I want to run appendix, is my QVO, which this more than fits the bill. If anything, it's more of a natural fit in there. All right, so now we're going to get into the shooting experience. Now, before I hop into it, I want to ask if you like this video, hit that like button. And you're going to want to subscribe because I'm going to be putting up this gun against the Terran Tactical Sand Viper, my Masterpiece Arms DS9, and as well as a late entry into the game, the Nighthawk Customs TRS Comp. So you're going to want to subscribe. Diving into the shooting experience, now I'd mentioned earlier that my first shots for this gun were in competition, and that was correct. Now the first thing I noticed off the bat was how easy this gun was to shoot. And a lot of those attributes added up because how all this comes together is designed to be a platform that you feel confident immediately shooting. As I touched on other tests that I did on this gun, you'll see that the theme with this is both consistency and the quality of shooting. As I was zeroing this gun and testing various ammos out on it, I was shooting this at 25 yards and I was putting a 3-inch group rather effortlessly. But to summarize it, it is an incredibly precise and accurate gun. You know, follow-ups and doubles with it weren't something I was really thinking about. It's funny because I watch guys in IDPA shoot this gun at what I feel is warp speed, and I see why. Because as this gun cycles in recoil, it is one of the softest and quickest guns that I've ever shot. Because this gun shoots so flat, you're not engaging too much muzzle rise. Most guns, even including my non-comped 2011s, will go probably about a good 1/2 inch to 1 inch, whereas this barely comes up. Now, the reason for that is that this slide can move so much quicker because it's light, that it's already going back by the time this thing starts to rise up. And once it gets to about its apex up here, it already is on its way back in. So that is part of the inherent design and success of this gun. And what that means is a very flat and consistent shooting experience. The thing I mentioned earlier is that because of the weight up front, as long as I shot static drills in a straight line, this thing was amazing.
That was my first run here. So first, you know, I picked it up the quickest already, but just the total time was 375.42 split second. Oops, sorry, that's the draw. 4-2 split. See, third shot, 4-2 split. Fourth shot, 4-2 split. Fifth shot, 4-2 split. Sixth shot, 4-2 split.
Interestingly enough, the weight of it is its advantage. This is probably lighter for a lot of the premium guns in this price range that are comped. And one thing I noticed as I was doing my 25-yard build drills is that I was able to be aggressive right out of the box. And in case you're not familiar with that, what I do is I grab a gun from the barrel at 25 yards and throw 6 shots. Now, mind you, I have to engage the safety when I pick it up. So everything has to fit correctly as I engage and get on target. Because it's a little on the lighter spectrum, I was able to engage my target a lot quicker than I thought. And as a result, these build drills ended up being its high point for this gun. Now, watch out in the shootout. You'll see where the advantage of having a lighter gun actually plays out. What that meant for me is that anytime I had to do any manipulation for it, whether it was reloads, draws, or even just going in transitions, it kind of just didn't feel like I was fighting a heavy gun. I have a good reference for that with 2 guns I own, one being my Shadow 2 for USPSA, and the other one I have is the Masterpiece Arms DS9 limited optics version, coming in at a hefty 57 ounces. Anytime I move those guns, and I have to be incredibly intentional, whereas anytime I did anything with this gun, everything just was coming together just as I'd hoped. Now, transitions are something I'm going to point out on this because It's not that it's a bad thing, but because the gun feels so confident in your hands and it's so easy to shoot, you can get a little overconfident on transitions and pull the trigger just a little earlier than you would like. Now, what that translated to me is on these targets on my transition drill, I would sometimes end up over transitioning because I was running the gun so hard, or I wasn't pushing it hard enough. Now, with time, I could iron that out. That just goes to show that I personally favor having the weight in the hands, where the weight on this gun is predominantly somewhere in this area. So what I had to teach myself throughout this drill is that I had to just slow down just a touch more and just that little bit of patience. And the benefit of that is I end up squeezing out the precision that this gun is capable of doing. So I will say that's actually a benefit. The one thing you not want to get ahead of is the gun, because this gun cycles so quick back to zero, you're tempted to want to shoot off rounds in areas that you probably should be slower in. So just touching on the reliability, in the time I ran it through all my test matches, everything I had no malfunctions. So who is this gun for? Well, this gun is for that person that wants to be as close as they can be to buying an advantage. Now, Honest Outlaw actually pointed that out, because I'm with him in the sense that yes, and everybody else out there, that you really can't buy an advantage in this gun, but this gun is so easy to shoot that even mediocre shooters can look good on this, and I've actually verified that in competition when I've seen guys and gals grab this gun and put groups out there no bigger than 2 inches at 15 yards with very little effort. That I can tell is a point where there's pretty much the gun doing a lot of the work, and this gun does that well. That's where you start to see the value proposition of this gun come into play here. Now, you may want to harp on the plastic trigger and the polymer grip. Well, guys, that's just part of the design of this gun and what this ecosystem gets to. Now, you certainly could change this trigger out if you wanted to for your desire, and if you want something a little bit longer like I would prefer, you can do that. But it's not something that I would say is a deterrent in the actual value make of that, which for me is everything that this gun kind of conjures up is in its shooting experience. The tighter tolerances, the comp, the way it's full designed, this gun from the ground up was designed to shoot and shoot well. Speaking of competitions, well, I would say it's for that shooter who wants to have something they feel confident in the hands with and just let it go out there and print holes. Now, please let that be a disclaimer that you're gonna have a lot more smile shooting this gun, because it's gonna be placing shots where you thought they were bad, they ended up being really, really, really good. With that said, guys, get out there and we'll see you out the ring.